It was late in old Kyoto, the narrow streets lit only by paper lanterns swaying in the wind. A merchant, weary from travel, wandered home after hours at the tea house. The air was heavy with mist, and the wooden houses leaned close, as though eavesdropping on his footsteps. At the bend of an alley, he saw her. A woman stood beneath a lantern, her back turned, her long hair shining like black silk. The folds of her kimono glimmered faintly with moisture from the night air. She seemed alone, vulnerable, perhaps waiting for someone. The merchant hesitated, then approached. She turned to face him, and for a moment he felt his breath falter. Her beauty was arresting. Pale skin, graceful posture, eyes that shimmered with something unspoken. She lowered her gaze, as though shy, and began to walk ahead slowly, inviting him to follow. Desire mingled with curiosity. He followed. The alley grew darker, the lanterns fewer, until only the sound of his own sandals echoed. She stopped at last and raised her face fully into the light. Where there should have been eyes, a nose, lips, there was nothing. Smooth, blank skin stretched across her face like a mask of flesh. No mouth to smile, no eyes to meet, no features at all. The merchant staggered back, horror rising in his chest, yet even in his terror, he could not look away. The woman's faceless beauty seemed to both repel and hold him, as if emptiness itself were seducing him. Origins of the Noppera-bō. This, too, is an old story of Japan, the legend of the Noppera-bō, the faceless ghost. Known as Mujina or Noppera-bō, depending on the region, these spirits have walked Japanese folklore for centuries. The first written records trace back to the Edo period, 1603 to 1868, when strange encounters in the night were carefully noted in travelers' diaries and temple records. The essence of their horror was simple, yet profound. They appeared human, even alluring. A traveler might meet a beautiful woman, a monk might encounter a fellow priest, a child might see a parent. Only later, when trust or desire had taken hold, would the face vanish, leaving behind a smooth, terrifying blankness. Unlike monstrous demons with claws and fangs, the Noppera-bō frightened by subtraction, not addition. Their weapon was absence. In a culture where the face is the seat of identity, emotion, and intimacy, to lose it, or to see it lost, was to stand at the edge of the abyss. The Faceless Woman of Kyoto, the silent monk at a temple gate, the stranger at the bridge, all carried the same chill. They represented not only the supernatural, but the ultimate terror of disconnection, of intimacy betrayed by nothingness. To understand the unsettling fascination of the Noppera-bō, one must first grasp how beauty functioned in the imagination of old Japan. The Noppera-bō does not terrify immediately. She does not leap from shadows with monstrous claws. Instead, she arrives clothed in a lure. She is beautiful at first glance, often appearing as a graceful woman draped in elegant kimono, her hair glossy and long, her gestures soft and deliberate. The first reaction of her victim is rarely fear. It is attraction. Desire enters the story before horror does. And this is where her legend draws its power. She embodies the fragile seam between seduction and annihilation. The enigma of beauty without features. What makes the Noppera-bō uniquely disturbing is not merely that her face disappears. It is that the disappearance happens after intimacy has begun to form. A smile glimpsed in lamplight, a shy glance, the subtle lowering of eyes, these are the first gestures that draw her closer. In the quiet alleys of Edo, a woman's lowered gaze or the brush of her sleeve was charged with suggestion. To encounter such signs in the night was to feel a pulse of possibility. But then, the revelation comes. There is no mouth to smile, no eyes to lower, no features at all. The very instruments of seduction vanish, leaving behind a smooth, blank mask. And yet, paradoxically, this very absence intensifies the memory of what came before. The victim is left suspended between two realities, the recollection of beauty and the presence of void. And in this contradiction lies her eroticism, the ultimate impossibility of knowing whether one desired the woman or the emptiness that replaced her. The fetish of the unknown. Desire in folklore is often sharpened by mystery. The less one knows, the more one fills the silence with imagination. The Noppera-bō exploits this to perfection. In psychological terms, she is the fantasy made flesh, but flesh that betrays. To approach her is to step into the abyss of one's own longings. Because once her face is gone, what remains is the blank canvas of the viewer's own desires. The merchant, the monk, the samurai all project into her facelessness whatever they most crave or most fear. This projection makes her uniquely intimate. The succubus tempts with exaggerated sexuality. The kitsune enchants with sly wit. But the Noppera-bō seduces by erasure. She offers nothing, and in nothing, the mind supplies everything. Eroticism in absence. In Edo period aesthetics, the erotic was often tied to restraint, concealment, and suggestion. A glimpse of pale wrist beneath kimono sleeve, the sound of a hidden laugh behind a folding fan. These subtle hints were often considered more powerful than explicit display. The Noppera-bō is the ultimate expression of this philosophy. She withholds not a gesture or a limb, but the entire face. She is concealment made complete, the final veil pulled over intimacy. And yet the act of unveiling, of turning to reveal blankness, carries the weight of an erotic climax. To be seduced by her is to be seduced by negation. In the absence of eyes, one sees too much. In the absence of a mouth, one imagines whispers never spoken. Her facelessness is not emptiness. It is excess, overwhelming the mind with possibilities. The feminine mystery magnified. The faceless woman also reflects the cultural perception of femininity as a realm of mystery. In traditional society, women were often idealized as unknowable, elusive, veiled in layers of fabric and etiquette. The Noppera-bō takes this mystique to its extreme. By stripping away the very seat of expression, she becomes the perfect embodiment of the unknowable woman. She is pure enigma, the body of beauty without the face of humanity. This transforms her into both dream and nightmare, a fantasy of possession entwined with the horror of annihilation. The seduction of terror. What makes the Noppera-bō enduringly fascinating is that she does not separate desire from fear. She fuses them. The victim is drawn in by allure, and at the very height of temptation, horror erupts. Yet even in terror, the memory of that allure lingers. The victim is left trembling not only with fear of death, but with shame at having desired what was never real. Thus, the Noppera-bō embodies a lesson older than written myth, that the line between attraction and destruction is perilously thin, and that the face of desire may vanish at the very moment one reaches for it.
If the Noppera-bō terrified by erasure, she seduced by suggestion. Her entire strategy, as the legends tell it, was not to assault, but to invite. She does not leap from shadows screaming. She does not claw or howl. She waits. She presents herself with poise, composure, the stillness of someone who knows she need not chase because her prey will come to her. The first encounter, familiarity and comfort. Most stories begin the same way. A man walks alone and sees a woman by the roadside, at a bridge, or beneath a lantern. She appears not strange, but ordinary, sometimes even familiar. She might resemble a neighbor, a courtesan glimpsed earlier in the evening, or in more chilling tales, even a wife. This familiarity is the first snare. Desire does not always begin with strangeness. It begins with recognition, with the subtle comfort of the known. The victim thinks, she is like someone I know, someone safe, someone reachable. And in this half-recognition, he allows himself to draw near. The gestures of invitation. The Noppera-bō rarely speaks. When she does, it is brief, almost whispered, a greeting, a question, a remark about the weather. But more often, it is the gesture that ensnares. A turn of the head, as though shy. A hand resting lightly on her sleeve. A slow walk ahead, her figure retreating just enough for him to follow. In Edo, Japan, where the erotic was encoded in movements rather than exposure, such gestures carried immense weight. The mere lowering of eyes, the hesitant pause at a corner, the subtle bow of the head, all suggested intimacy, vulnerability, permission. The Noppera-bō mastered these signals. She knew that a man, even when wary, could not resist the pull of a woman who seemed to invite him with silence. The seduction of silence. Silence is itself a weapon. Alone at night, silence is rarely neutral. It magnifies the beating of one's heart, the echo of footsteps, the swell of imagination. The Noppera-bō thrives in that silence. By not speaking, she forces the man to fill the void. He imagines her voice, imagines her intentions. Every gesture becomes charged, every glance exaggerated. In his mind, she becomes not only a woman, but the possibility of every woman he has longed for. Some tales describe men walking for long stretches beside her, their bodies warm with anticipation, though no word had passed between them. By the time she revealed her faceless truth, the silence itself had already bound them. The illusion of intimacy. Another method of seduction was imitation. Folklore tells of Noppera-bō appearing as the wife of a man, calling to him in a familiar tone, leading him deeper into night. Only when he leaned close to kiss her or to whisper her name did her features vanish, leaving him in despair and horror. This imitation of intimacy, becoming what the victim most desired or trusted, was the cruelest trick. It blurred the boundary between love and fear, making betrayal feel like a wound cut into the very soul. The gradual unveiling. The climax of her seduction is not sudden. It builds like the slow opening of a fan. First, the man sees her partly in shadow, where beauty thrives in suggestion. Then, perhaps, a tilt of the head reveals a hint of sadness or allure. Then comes the pause. She turns fully, raising her face into the light. For a heartbeat, the man expects the completion of the promise, a smile, a glance, an affirmation of intimacy. And then, nothing. Smooth skin, blankness, the erasure of all the desire she had cultivated. The horror is magnified precisely because it is delayed. He is made to walk the path of seduction, to invest in it, to hunger for it, only for it to dissolve into void. The betrayal is not of flesh, but of expectation. The predatory patience. What sets the Noppera-bō apart from other spirits is patience. She does not rush her victims, nor does she need to. Her power lies in the certainty that men, driven by curiosity and desire, will undo themselves. This patience is a form of dominance. She does not plead or demand, she allows. She lets the victim believe he is in control, that he chooses to approach, to follow, to linger. Only at the final moment does she reveal that he was never in control at all, that every step was anticipated, every hesitation foreseen.
seduction through fear. The final paradox of her method is this: even when fear strikes, it does not erase attraction. Many tales describe men who, upon seeing her faceless void, screamed and fled. Yet some tell of others who could not move, paralyzed not only by terror, but by fascination. The human mind, caught between revulsion and allure, often fails to choose. The Noppera-bō thrives in this paralysis. Her facelessness does not repel completely. It binds, it hypnotizes. It forces the victim to confront that what he desires may also be what destroys him. A lesson in the dance of seduction. Thus, the Noppera-bō seduces not by offering, but by withholding, not by words, but by silence, not by rushing, but by waiting. She is the embodiment of the principle that the most powerful lure is not abundance, but absence. To walk beside her, to be drawn in by her gestures, is to participate in a dance where the final step is always betrayal. And yet, knowing this, the stories tell us, men still followed. For in the face of the faceless, desire does not die. It deepens until it consumes.
The Noppera-bō is not a random spirit. She does not appear to everyone. In the old stories, her victims are selected with uncanny precision, as if she hunts not bodies, but weaknesses. Who she chooses reveals as much about human desire as it does about her own spectral hunger. The lonely traveler. Above all, the Noppera-bō preys upon solitude. The most common setting for her appearance is the lonely road. A man traveling home at night, a merchant returning late, a farmer wandering after dusk. Why the lonely? Because solitude is fertile ground for imagination. A man walking alone, with only the rustle of bamboo and the sound of his sandals, begins to project longing into the night. He becomes susceptible to any presence that promises warmth, companionship, or distraction from silence. Folklore is clear. A group of travelers rarely sees her, but a single man almost always does. The Noppera-bō is a spirit of one-on-one encounters, where intimacy and vulnerability are strongest. The curious and the restless. Curiosity is another weakness she exploits. Many tales describe men who see her standing quietly and feel compelled to approach, not because they must, but because they cannot resist the mystery. Why is she alone? Why does she wait? Why does she not speak? Such questions are snares. The Noppera-bō thrives on restless minds that cannot leave unanswered riddles behind. In this way, she resembles a riddle given human form. To approach her is to seek an answer, and the answer is always nothing. The young and impulsive. Legends often emphasize the youth of her victims. Young samurai, students, apprentices, those whose blood was hot and whose experience was thin. For them, beauty in the night was an irresistible temptation. A mature man might hesitate, might suspect danger, but the young are more likely to follow beauty without question. In this sense, she is almost an initiation figure, a dangerous test that youth fails by surrendering too easily to a lure. In Edo period culture, this reflects a deeper anxiety, that the vigor of youth, unchecked by wisdom, leads directly to ruin. The Noppera-bō punishes this impulsive desire, leaving the young man with nothing but shame and terror. The faithful and the pious. But she does not choose only the restless. Some tales describe monks and priests encountering her at temple gates,
why would she seek those bound to discipline and faith? Perhaps precisely because of that discipline. The Noppera-bō tests devotion, appearing first as a fellow monk or as a woman in distress. When the pious approach, out of compassion, not lust, she reveals her blankness. The horror here is not erotic, but spiritual. The monk, whose faith is rooted in the recognition of truth and identity, finds himself confronted by nothingness. For him, the faceless woman is not a temptation of flesh, but a mirror of cosmic void. She becomes the embodiment of the Buddhist fear of muga, the dissolution of the self. The married man. One of the cruelest variations of the legend is the Noppera-bō who takes the form of a man's wife. In such tales, the husband returns home late at night, weary and perhaps guilty from pleasures at a tea house. His wife greets him silently. She seems distant, but when he looks closer, her face has vanished. The message is stark. Infidelity is punished by facelessness, by the erasure of intimacy. The wife who once embodied love becomes a blank mask, revealing that betrayal has destroyed not only the bond, but the very image of the beloved. Here, the Noppera-bō functions as a moral spirit, punishing the weakness of men who fail their vows. The greedy and the selfish. Another type of victim is the merchant or miser, men driven by greed. One story tells of a man counting his coins by lamplight when a beautiful woman entered his room. She drew near, promising pleasure, but when he leaned closer, her face dissolved, and he fainted, waking to find his coins scattered and his fortune gone. In such stories, the Noppera-bō becomes a punisher of greed, proving that wealth cannot buy beauty, intimacy, or safety. The greedy are undone not by poverty, but by desire for what cannot be possessed. The symbolism of choice. Taken together, these victim types reveal a pattern. The Noppera-bō chooses not randomly, but with symbolic precision. The lonely, punished for seeking comfort in strangers. The curious, punished for probing mysteries best left untouched. The young, punished for reckless desire. The pious, tested with visions of nothingness. The married, punished for infidelity or neglect. The greedy, punished for thinking beauty can be bought. She is not a demon who devours flesh indiscriminately. She is a mirror held to human weakness. Each victim's fate reflects the secret flaw that led him to her. Desire as the common thread. Yet there is one unifying element: desire. Whether it is desire for beauty, for answers, for comfort, or for wealth, every victim seeks something. The Noppera-bō offers it for a moment, then strips it away, leaving only emptiness. This is the cruel genius of her legend. She does not invent the weakness, she reveals it, and once revealed, it cannot be forgotten. Men who saw her often lived, but they lived haunted, their desires now bound forever to the memory of facelessness. The encounter with the Noppera-bō never ends with the simple disappearance of her face. That is only the beginning of the terror. To see a face vanish into smooth, blank skin is not just a visual horror, it is an unraveling of meaning itself. The victim is left suspended between attraction and annihilation, unable to comprehend what has been revealed. The moment of revelation. Folklore is meticulous about the sequence of the encounter. At first, the woman seems human, perhaps shy, perhaps alluring. She invites with silence, draws the victim forward with small gestures, then, at the climax of desire or trust, she lifts her head. For a heartbeat, the man expects intimacy, a smile, a gaze, perhaps even a kiss. But instead, he finds absence. No eyes to meet, no lips to touch, no features at all. Smoothness where humanity should be. That moment is described in diaries and oral tales as a wound deeper than steel. Some victims collapsed instantly, fainting from shock. Others stood frozen, trembling, unable to scream, their voices trapped in their throats as though the blankness had stolen not only their sight, but their breath. The collapse of desire. What happens to desire when its object is erased? The stories suggest two outcomes. For some, desire dies instantly. The man flees into the night, stumbling blindly, haunted by the image of facelessness. These men often survive, but they never forget. In later years, they describe the memory as an obsession, an unhealed scar. I loved her before she turned, and I hated myself after she did. For others, however, desire lingers perversely. The facelessness does not kill attraction, it mutates it. Men who could not look away spoke of being held by the void, of feeling drawn closer even as terror grew. They confessed in whispers that part of them still longed to touch her, as if intimacy with nothingness might resolve the unbearable contradiction. These are the most tragic victims, not dead in body, but lost in spirit. The paralysis of fear. Another common motif is paralysis. The Noppera-bō does not need to strike physically, her revelation alone immobilizes. Men stand rooted to the ground, unable to turn or run, their will dissolved. One tale from Edo describes a samurai who followed a courtesan through lantern-lit streets. When she turned faceless, he reached for his sword but found he could not draw it. His hand trembled, his arm refused. He remained frozen until dawn, when villagers found him pale and mute, staring at the empty road. He never held a sword again. This paralysis is more than fear, it is domination. The Noppera-bō does not fight, she does not need to. She owns the mind so completely that the body ceases to respond. The long haunting. Unlike some yokai, the Noppera-bō does not always kill outright. More often, she leaves the victim alive, but transformed. Men who encountered her were said to suffer visions in dreams. They would wake at night to find a faceless figure standing at the foot of their futon, watching silently. Some claimed they heard her breathing, though she had no mouth. Others said they felt her fingers on their skin, tracing outlines of eyes and lips that were no longer there. Such men wasted away slowly. Their appetites failed, their voices grew weak. They withdrew from family and friends, speaking little, staring often at walls as if searching for faces. In some versions, they eventually lost their own features in death, the skin of their corpses tightening until their faces seemed unnaturally smooth, blank, as though she had claimed them entirely. Rare escapes and conditional mercy. There are, however, rare accounts where the Noppera-bō spares her victim. In one story, a farmer met her on a bridge. When she revealed her blank face, he dropped to his knees chanting sutras in terror. She did not harm him. Instead, she turned and vanished into the mist. From that night on, he lived as a devout Buddhist, convinced he had been granted a warning rather than a punishment. In another, a young man encountered her but refused to flee. He bowed deeply, acknowledging her power, and walked away without speaking. He survived, but in his village he never married. People whispered that he had seen a beauty too great, too terrible, to ever love again.
These exceptions reinforce the sense that she is not mindless. She chooses, she judges, she decides whether a victim's fear or reverence is enough to satisfy her. The emptiness that follows. Whether through death, paralysis, or haunting, the victim's fate always carries the same theme: emptiness. What she leaves behind is not a wound in the flesh, but a hollowing of the soul. The merchant who once desired companionship walks through life afraid of every woman's face. The samurai who once carried courage in his blade can no longer lift it. The monk who once prayed to visions of truth now trembles at the memory of a blank void. The Noppera-bō does not consume life in the way demons do. She consumes meaning. She takes the most intimate moments of trust, desire, or recognition and strips them bare, leaving only the nothingness behind. And in that nothingness, men find their undoing. The final lesson. To meet the Noppera-bō is to learn that desire itself is fragile, that beauty is an illusion, and that the self can vanish as easily as a face in the night. Her revelation is not only supernatural, it is existential. For the terror of the faceless woman is not merely that she has no face. It is that she proves in one instant that identity, intimacy, and love may all be masks, ready to dissolve into blankness the moment we reach for them.
The horror of the Noppera-bō is not only visual, it is symbolic. A ghost without claws, without bloody jaws, without monstrous fangs, and yet more terrifying than demons who roar in the night. Why? Because she embodies something deeper than violence. She embodies the fear of absence. The face as the seat of identity. In Japanese culture, as in many others, the face is not just a part of the body. It is the mirror of the soul, the stage of emotion, the anchor of identity. To look into another's eyes is to recognize them. To see their smile is to connect. Without a face, there is no person, only a body stripped of individuality. The Noppera-bō terrifies because she destroys recognition. One moment, you are drawn to a beautiful woman, her face a promise of intimacy. The next, she is no one. Her existence collapses into blankness. This is not only horror, it is humiliation. To have been seduced by a faceless being is to confront the truth that what you desired was never real. The shame of losing face. There is a uniquely Japanese resonance to this fear. The phrase kao o ushinau, to lose face, means disgrace, dishonor, humiliation. Reputation, honor, respect, all are tied to the metaphor of the face. The Noppera-bō literalizes this concept. She does not just shame her victims by appearing faceless. She makes them feel they have lost face themselves. They followed beauty, they surrendered to desire, and in the end, they stood exposed, humiliated by emptiness. To encounter her is to realize you have been fooled, not by another, but by your own longing. The Buddhist shadow, emptiness as terror. The Noppera-bō also resonates with Buddhist philosophy. In Buddhism, there is the concept of muga, the absence of self. To attain enlightenment, one must recognize that the self is illusion, that identity is impermanent. But while monks strive for this realization through meditation, the Noppera-bō forces it upon her victims through terror. To look at her faceless void is to confront Muga not as liberation, but as horror. She is the nightmare version of enlightenment, not peace, but annihilation. In this sense, she is both religious and anti-religious. She embodies the truths of impermanence, but delivers them as punishment, not wisdom. The erotic symbol of mystery. Facelessness heightens her eroticism. Desire thrives on mystery, on what is hidden, veiled, left unsaid. The Noppera-bō is the extreme of this mystery. She hides not with a fan or veil, but with the absence of features themselves. This absence seduces precisely because it is incomprehensible. Men are drawn to her beauty, then confronted with void. And in that void, imagination does the rest. The blank face is not emptiness, but a screen onto which the victim projects every forbidden desire, every secret fear. Thus, the Noppera-bō is both erotic and terrifying, because she offers not herself, but the reflection of the one who gazes. The collapse of communication. Without a mouth, there can be no speech. Without eyes, no recognition. Without a face, no expression of joy, sorrow, love, or anger. The Noppera-bō embodies the collapse of communication itself. In Edo period society, where rituals of politeness and subtle gestures governed human interaction, the idea of a being without a communicative face was catastrophic. She breaks the rules of intimacy. She annihilates social bonds. She turns a conversation into a one-sided mirror. This makes her especially terrifying not only as a spirit, but as a metaphor for alienation. The moment when we realize the person before us cannot or will not truly connect. Facelessness as punishment. The stories make clear that facelessness is not random, it is judgment. The greedy, the lustful, the unfaithful all encounter the faceless woman. To see her is to be reminded that your desire has led you astray. In this sense, facelessness becomes the ultimate punishment, the erasure of intimacy itself. Where once there was beauty, now there is nothing. Where once there was connection, now there is void. The victim is left with shame, not cuts of steel. And shame, as the tales suggest, lingers far longer than cuts of steel. The universal fear. Finally, the Noppera-bō's facelessness resonates because it taps into a universal fear, the loss of identity. What are we without our faces? Without recognition, without expression, without the ability to be known? To lose the face is to lose humanity itself. This is why the legend survives, for beneath the ghostly imagery lies an existential truth. We are all terrified of nothingness. We crave beauty, love, intimacy, but beneath it all is the void, waiting. The Noppera-bō forces us to look at it. The faceless truth. Thus, the Noppera-bō is not simply a ghost who frightens lonely men on dark roads. She is the embodiment of cultural anxieties. The shame of desire exposed, the fear of dishonor and losing face, the dread of emptiness hidden within beauty, the collapse of intimacy into alienation, the terror of the void at the heart of existence. She is more than a yokai.
She is a philosophy made flesh, a nightmare carved out of cultural truths. Her facelessness is not a lack. It is a mirror, reflecting the fears of those who dare to gaze upon her.
The Noppera-bō does not exist alone in the landscape of myth. Across cultures, stories abound of supernatural women who tempt, seduce, and destroy. From the icy embrace of Japan's Yuki-onna to the fiery lust of Western succubi, from the fox spirits of China and Korea to the vampiric brides of Eastern Europe, humankind has long imagined figures that fuse beauty with terror. Yet within this chorus of deadly seductresses, the Noppera-bō sings in her own key, quiet, faceless, and devastatingly empty. Yuki-onna, the Snow Woman. The most natural comparison is with her sister of Japanese folklore, Yuki-onna. Like the Noppera-bō, she lures men in the stillness of night. She too combines beauty with fatality, tenderness with destruction. But their methods differ. Yuki-onna seduces with excess, with the intoxicating kiss, with the burning chill of her breath, with the paradox of warmth entwined in death. She overwhelms her victim with sensation. The Noppera-bō, by contrast, seduces with absence. She offers not the ecstasy of a kiss, but the void where a kiss should be. Where Yuki-onna is the avalanche, Noppera-bō is the silence after the snow has fallen. Both kill, but by opposite paths, one through fullness, the other through emptiness. Together, they reveal two halves of a cultural anxiety, too much intimacy and too little, the overwhelming flood and the unbearable lack. Succubi, Western demons of lust. In the West, the closest analog is the succubus, a demon who visits men in dreams, draining them through sexual pleasure. Succubi embody explicit lust. Their beauty is exaggerated, their methods unashamedly carnal. The Noppera-bō could not be more different. She never flaunts, never clings, never whispers words of fire. Instead, she withholds, cloaks, waits. Where the succubus feeds on indulgence, the faceless woman thrives on suggestion. Where the succubus takes by offering too much, the faceless woman takes by offering nothing. This contrast highlights a cultural divide. In Europe, the terror was of desire unrestrained. In Japan, it was of desire betrayed, of intimacy dissolving into alienation. The fox spirits, kitsune and hulijing. In East Asia, the fox spirit is the classic shape-shifting seductress. In Japan, the kitsune. In China, the hulijing. In Korea, the kumiho. All share a common motif, the beautiful woman who hides a beast within. These spirits seduce men for their life force, often by masquerading as lovers or wives. The terror comes from betrayal. What you thought was human reveals itself to be animal. The Noppera-bō mirrors this betrayal, but with a crucial difference. She does not reveal claws or tails, no beastly snarl beneath her beauty. Instead, she reveals nothing at all. She does not replace humanity with monstrosity. She erases humanity entirely. If the fox woman terrifies by unveiling animality, the Noppera-bō terrifies by unveiling void. The kitsune says, "You loved what was beast all along." The Noppera-bō says, "You loved what was never there." The vampiric bride. In Eastern Europe, legends of vampiric brides echo similar fears. Women of unearthly beauty who seduce men only to drain their blood. Their method is intimacy weaponized. A kiss becomes a bite. Love becomes predation. Again, the Noppera-bō is quieter. No bite, no blood. Her cruelty lies in humiliation. She drains not veins, but meaning. The victim walks away alive, but haunted by shame, trembling at the thought that he gave his heart to nothing. Why the Noppera-bō stands apart. What sets the Noppera-bō apart from all these spirits is her minimalism. She does not roar like demons, does not shimmer like fox spirits, does not freeze like Yuki-onna. She simply is, a blank, smooth face where beauty should be. And yet this simplicity magnifies the horror, because she does not just challenge the body, she challenges the mind. She turns desire itself into a trap, not through indulgence, but through its own reflection. In every culture, seductive spirits embody human fears about sex, intimacy, and trust. But only the Noppera-bō dares to embody nothingness. She is not beast, not demon, not vampire, not even lover. She is void, clothed in flesh. The lesson across myths. Placed among her sisters, the Noppera-bō represents a unique warning. Yuki-onna warns that beauty may freeze you. Succubi warn that lust may consume you. Fox spirits warn that desire may deceive you. Vampiric brides warn that intimacy may bleed you. But the Noppera-bō warns something darker, that the person you reach for may be nothing at all. Her facelessness strips away every illusion and leaves only absence. She is the ghost of disillusionment itself. Legends are not fragile. They shift, adapt, and survive, wearing new masks for new generations. The Noppera-bō, faceless and silent, has never vanished from Japanese imagination. Instead, she lingers, sliding from whispered Edo period tales into novels, horror films, manga, and anime, and even internet folklore. Her blank face still gazes out at us, more terrifying now than ever. Literature and ghost stories. After the Edo period, Japan's fascination with yokai only deepened. Writers of the Meiji era collected regional ghost stories, often highlighting encounters with the Faceless Woman. Lefadio Hearn, the Western collector of Japanese folklore, popularized yokai stories abroad in the late 19th century. Though he wrote less of Noppera-bō than of Yuki-onna, the faceless ghost still slipped into his circles of influence, inspiring generations of storytellers. Later writers of horror and mystery, both Japanese and Western, drew on the same imagery, a woman who seduces by silence only to strip away identity at the last moment. The faceless figure became shorthand for betrayal, alienation, and existential dread. Noppera-bō in film. In cinema, especially Japanese horror, the Faceless Woman found fertile ground. In the mid-20th century, she appeared in kaidan films, traditional ghost story anthologies, where her reveal was staged with shadows and silence, letting the audience feel the same betrayal as the victim. Later, in the golden age of J-horror, 1990s to 2000s, the faceless ghost became part of the visual language of fear. While long-haired female spirits, like Sadako from Ringu, dominated the scene, echoes of the Noppera-bō lurked in background characters. Faceless figures seen in reflections, blurred shapes on videotapes, or apparitions that turned blank before dissolving. For filmmakers, her power lay in subtlety. Blood and screams could be shocking, but the sudden revelation of a blank face provoked a different kind of terror, slow, intimate, and inescapable. In manga and anime, the Noppera-bō has thrived in visual storytelling. In Gegege no Kitaro, the classic yokai manga, she is one of the many spirits who haunt humans, sometimes tragic, sometimes malicious. In darker horror manga, such as those of Junji Ito, facelessness often appears as a motif, smooth skin where eyes and mouths should be, direct echoes of the Noppera-bō's legacy. In anime, she occasionally appears as a background yokai or as a shapeshifter, a reminder that beauty and terror coexist in silence. Her blankness works perfectly in drawn form, where the sudden removal of detail creates a shock more potent than gore. The Internet Age. In the modern digital world, the Noppera-bō has found new life.
Online forums and creepypasta sites tell of encounters with faceless figures in dreams, forests, or abandoned buildings. Often these modern retellings blur her with other myths, like the Western Slender Man, another faceless entity. But there is a difference. The Slender Man is faceless because he is alien, unknowable. The Noppera-bō is faceless because she was once intimate, a woman, a lover, a wife, and then erased. This distinction makes her far more personal, more cruel, more human. Why she still haunts us? Why does the Noppera-bō endure? Why does her faceless void remain frightening in an age saturated with digital monsters and cinematic gore? Because her horror is timeless. It does not rely on special effects or shock. It relies on universal truths, that desire can betray us, that love can dissolve into alienation, that the person we reach for may vanish into nothingness, that identity itself may be a mask waiting to be stripped away. She endures because she embodies absence, and absence is the one terror that technology, cities, and progress cannot erase. The final reflection. To see the Noppera-bō is to confront not a monster, but a truth. Her facelessness is a mirror, showing us that our deepest fears are not of claws or blood, but of emptiness. Emptiness in others and emptiness in ourselves. She is the ghost of loneliness, of failed intimacy, of love that reveals its own futility. She is the whisper in the night that beauty may dissolve, that trust may vanish, that even love may reveal itself as nothing. And so, whether in the lantern-lit streets of Edo or in the glowing screens of the 21st century, the Noppera-bō waits. She waits in silence, faceless yet unforgettable. Not because she devours flesh, but because she devours certainty. For in the end, her blank skin is not just absence, it is us, reflected in the void.